Hi, my name is Mindy Sutherland, and I am doing my second language speaker profile. Obviously, for privacy, I have changed the names. Alright, so starting off with Carl's background and birth, we're going to talk about his parents. Both parents were born in Mexico. They lived in cities that bordered California. Kyle's father came to America alone when he was 14 years old. He developed English pretty well over time and can speak English well today. His mother came to America when she was 25 years old, and her English is very limited, and she only speaks Spanish now. Carl is a 22-year-old male and was born in Santa Ana, California. He is the youngest sibling with one older brother and one older sister. For his home life, he spoke English with his siblings. They played together, and his brother was 3 years older than him. So when he was growing up, his brother had acquired English very well. And so they played a lot in English. He speaks Spanish when communicating with his parents, even to this day. So he had a Spanish-speaking household and an English-speaking school life. He lived in neighborhoods that were predominantly Hispanic and lived in a low SES. Going back, I wanted to briefly go over this quote that he says, "If I didn't have my siblings, I don't know how I would have floated by. It would have been a lot more difficult." So he pays tributes to the experiences he had with his siblings growing up and learning English with them. During the elementary school years, here I put in another quote that he says, "While yes, my English wasn't great, neither was anybody else's." So he did not attend a preschool, and he went straight into his schooling career in kindergarten. He attended 3 different elementary schools, and the school that he attended the longest was predominantly Hispanic. He felt a pressure to assimilate to the culture and the language, even in that school, and in other schools as well as he moved. When he moved into the 4th grade into a different school that was more diverse with the SES with the socioeconomic statuses, he definitely noticed that he struggled. He struggled with reading, writing, and speaking, and he feels like that's because the phrasing is different. He didn't feel like school was supportive of his learning. All of the students in his school were struggling, so students didn't get pulled out for individualized service because all of them were learning English together. Another quote that he says when talking about when he moved schools and there was a lot of different socioeconomic statuses at that school, he says, "They were forced to read books. I didn't do that when I was a kid." You notice that kind of stuff. So he could see the difference between the students that were higher SES and how he grew up. He felt lucky that he had teachers that could handle other ethnicities. He felt that they didn't struggle with helping him because all students were all the same. He didn't feel that his language was an asset in the classroom either, though. He felt that he had to work more for things that came naturally to the other students that grew up speaking English. They knew the grammar structure and how to say things correctly, whereas he didn't. So he felt like he had to work a lot harder to gain knowledge of those things. He felt that there is a sense of shame involved with asking for help and trying to fit in. He feels like that even now with the culture of today in society, that there's this pressure to want to fit in, and there's a shame that's felt with having to ask for help. Another quote that he has, "I don't feel that there is an environment set up where you feel comfortable to ask for help." He's speaking about his school experience and how there really wasn't a place for him to say, "Hey, I'm not understanding this." And his friends and him felt a sense of shame in not being able to be at the same level as the other students. So they just pretended that they knew, even though they didn't. And as he mentioned earlier, there wasn't an environment for him to be able to say that he can't or that he doesn't understand what's going on. Some really powerful quotes I feel from this experience and interview with Kyle. One of the greatest educational tools that we had at our disposals was television and movies. He's talking about growing up. He used television and movies to learn English, and he pays tribute to that a lot. He actually has, he's got a career in film and television because of not because of that, but that's something that he has a huge interest in. So I can see how that could influence his English learning. My hunch is that technology would put more of a divide between the student and the teacher. So he's speaking about the classroom now, and he worries that he wishes that there was more time one-on-one with the teacher when he was in school, and he feels like technology is taking away from that today. Another quote, "I'll just pretend to know what's going on and hopefully I'll figure it out." This was a thought that he had in school, as I mentioned earlier, with not having an environment to feel safe and comfortable to explain that he didn't know what was going on. He just would pretend. I don't know if there is a way, but if there is a way to implement the students' knowledge they already have with the language and somehow make that useful to them learning English, yeah, that would be helpful. I found this quote so powerful because this is exactly what we're learning about right now. It's how to embrace the language of the students that they already have knowledge of in order to help them gain an understanding of English as well. I just thought that this was just so spot on, and I couldn't believe that he had said it, and so I had to include it. "My Spanish is not as good as my English now because I had to forget a lot to learn English." This ties into what we were talking about last class and how with the TVE in Texas and how the administrators and teachers expected the students to just forget Spanish and that their focus should be on English. And that was the case for him as well. He felt like he had to forget Spanish in order to learn English. "Learning a different language, I am able to think in ways that people who do not speak Spanish aren't able to. The way you speak forms the way you are. Being able to speak a different language allows you to think a different way." I just thought that that was so powerful and true. The having such a diverse set of languages at your capacity to be able to pull from both and use those languages to connect with both cultures is very powerful, and it does help you become different and learn and think in a different way. And lastly, one of the things that he said last was that language is like a barrier, and it's so true. It's very true. So Kyle had some really great things to say and to add, and I was so thankful to be able to discuss those things with him. Lastly, for my summary, even through this experience, I can see the importance of the information we're learning about in this class, and I can see the connections. Kyle even says himself that the school system would be better off if they could utilize the language of the students that already have, if they could utilize the knowledge of the language that the students already have to help them acquire English. I can interpret this interview that time with teachers independently can help students feel safe to ask questions that they may not feel comfortable asking in front of the entire class. So I really want to take that knowledge and utilize that in my classroom and check in with my students every week and see how they're doing one-on-one so that I can provide them the space to feel comfortable enough to be able to say that they need help with something.